Okay, here we are. Yeah, we're continuing the conversation on the topic of artists. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi,
Welcome.
thank you.
Yeah, so the topic we're exploring is the role of art and artists in 21st century. And I don't know, we should probably start. And if Thorsten arrives, he can just jump in. Yeah, so my concept is kind of ruined for now, but
Yeah.
we'll improvise. Yeah,
Yes,
so
I'm happy to
yeah,
improvise.
Yeah, Rebecca is a Zimbabwean artist, but now based in London and affiliated with Goldsmith University, which is one of the top places for creative technology and art type of stuff. And she's an artist herself and a lecturer. So instead of me talking about you, I figured it would be much more interesting if you can tell your story through the lens of like what motivates you and how did you end up here. So how
Yeah,
did you end up like exploring all of this and what drives you? So before we start discussion.
yeah, no problem. So, as you've already said, I'm an artist and a creative technologist and an educator, and I have a lot of different interests that sort of meet in between all those three things. But I'm a painter by training originally, so a lot of my interests are driven by that, and they revolve around vision and embodied perception, sort of thinking a lot about how all of these, yeah, different things of what it means to be a human, what it means to have a body, a pair of eyes, all these sorts of things within older traditional media, so painting, sculpture, architecture, but more so now with immersive media, so thinking about VR, light installations, things like this. So for me, really, a lot of these concerns are age-old concerns of what it means to be human, and sort of seeing how that transforms and translates through these different uh, media is kind of what interests me. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and what does it mean to be an artist, in your
What does it
opinion?
mean? Oh,
Yeah.
it's a very, yeah, big question. What does it mean to be an artist? Um, it just, yeah, it means to be somebody who is kind of engaging with some sort of medium to make commentary on the world we live in, or to sort of yeah, work with perception often. So we think about music, we think about painting. It's how we perceive this stuff, how we receive it, and yeah, take it in. And yeah, so to be an artist means to be engaging with making, with producing output. um and yeah, I think the thing that is very central to me is this idea of commenting on the world, and yeah, sort of critiquing, engaging in these sorts of things. Yeah.
And how would you define generative art? Let's say to a 10-year-old.
Yeah, generative art. Go into my teacher mode. Well, I so when I teach about generative art and creative coding to my students, we often start, talking about process and rules based work. So thinking about creating a system that you can create with, basically, draw a line here, or draw 100 dots in random positions on a piece of paper. So giving yourself rules to make a piece of artwork. And then from there, I would talk about working with systems that have some sort of element of chance, or chaos within it. I always like to talk about Jackson Pollock, for example, who is a painter who, created by just flinging paint, and his system was a paintbrush, gravity, and a canvas. And so, generative art doesn't even need a computer, and we could actually create some generative art just with pen and paper, with paint. And I think that's kind of the core thing to remember, is that we can compute without computers, before diving into the the big stuff about, yeah, what is an autonomous agent, or what does it mean to really collaborate with AI or a machine.
Yeah, and also
Yeah.
seems that like that so much is happening at this point with like AI generative art in particular. Like the company behind Stable Diffusion valued at like $1 billion almost immediately. OpenAI everywhere in the news, and it's a lot of hype and probably like a bubble from a business perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But like, what excites you the most in terms of like real technological advancement uh, in these recent events with Dolly and Stable Diffusion and Midjourney and
Yeah.
oh
Well,
yeah.
I think, yeah, as being a somebody who loves technology and works with technology, I think that what's interesting is how this impacts humanity and how it impacts making in general. And I mean, I have a lot of colleagues and friends who work with machine learning, and what is interesting to see is how their processes adapt to that. So, for example, the artist in America who submitted an AI generated image and won a prize, and sort of all of the uproar this caused, and sort of traditional painters being like, this isn't art. But then when you actually, just do a slight dig and read about what his process was, he generated so many versions. And he talks about how this was like poetry, almost like sort of writing these words in different order, and going through this process of almost curating. And I think what's interesting about AI generated art in particular is that as an artist, you become a curator, you become a collaborator. And so within the communities that I make in and work with, this is something that's thrilling and exciting as an artist. But I think that's because, I also know people who are, still thinking about training different machine learning models and things like that. So, trying to think how you can push a system a bit more or break it apart. Yeah. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and yeah, it's also interesting to think about the art historically from the tools perspective, or like people were using tools that there just were available. So like they were using paint, and then like camera was invented, and then the whole new like category of art, so to say, emerged, say movies or and stuff like that. And based on that like change and trajectory, like what do you see coming in the future? There was like a very interesting point. The previous speaker was talking about like imaginary future where there's like a totally custom Netflix where all the movies are actually not like already pre-produced but made just for you based on certain inputs.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you see that going? And the question is, what happens with prior modes, say like different tools? Like, do you see painters existing in the future as well, as they survived obviously? So like, how do you see that dynamics of like human artist slash tool?
Yeah, I think I caught the end of the previous speaker, and I think it was interesting to hear him reflect on the fact that painters were originally threatened by photography, and I think that was a very interesting point. And you could almost say the same thing about traditional film photographers feeling threatened by the mobile phone, and the proliferation of images. And it's like, oh, now somebody won't need a professional photographer because they will have a phone, but yet they are still professional photographers and people still go to galleries to see works made by these artists who use photography as a medium. And so in this way, I think that, even if there is a lot of AI generated content, people will still want to see work that is made by humans, or made, a human in collaboration with AI, because it's kind of that question of that saying, if a tree falls in a forest and no one is there to hear it, did it fall? I wonder if there's a reverse thing with AI where it's like, if a human didn't communicate something, is anything being communicated? So I think that people will still want to have their fellow man and human beings comment on the age that we're living in using these tools. So sure, it might be nice to get that sort of like fluffy Netflix content that like you're like, oh, I'm just having a bad day, I want to watch a bad show, and kind of get the like feeling of switching your brain off. Like I'm sure, you might see possibilities where that sort of content is AI generated, but I still think people are going to want to ask, like, why? What does this mean? What's being communicated to me? And they'll go to the film and the Oscars, and they'll look for that content, is what I think. Yeah.
I mean, for example, like there are like these big like figures of great film directors, like cult figures, right? And great musicians and bands. Like, do you imagine the future where, like, for example, a generative artist can have that level of fame?
I think they already do. I mean, I know, for
Oh yeah,
example,
yeah. If we define, sorry, if we define like Jason Pollock as like generative artist, without like, but like, yeah, someone using AI, for example, being like super big.
yeah. I mean, somebody like I don't know if you know Mario Klingemann, for example. He's somebody who's already making a lot of AI work and is exhibiting in galleries and sort of being collected already. Anna Ridler, also somebody who is an AI artist who's being collected and showing at the Barbican, and they're already artists who are participating, using these tools. And again, when you hear them talk about these processes, it's about rethinking what it means to be an artist, in the sense of, yeah, it's about curation and collaboration, and yeah, it's process based art. You're working within a larger system to make this work. So yeah, I think it's already happening. I 100% think that, like, there will be famous greats, in history, who made only art with AI. 100%. Yeah. Oh, you're muted, I think.
Yeah, sorry. So it's also like so empowering that like any person on planet can become an artist, and like there's sort of like, well, understanding art not necessarily as like big artist thing and a profession, but rather like something you do for your own mental health, where you just like express your creativity. So I guess that like all of these tools will have like positive impact on human well-being in general, right? So all of a
Yeah, I mean,
sudden you have the tools to express yourself, although you were like afraid to like just draw on a piece of paper. Yeah.
yeah. I'm for sure. I think that there will be people who are drawn to different media in these ways. Like somebody who is loves a pen and pencil might not like this, whereas somebody who will be drawn to working with text and generating images using AI will have their moment. So yeah, I agree that it does open up new avenues of creativity, in some ways, of human creativity.
Yeah, do you personally use any of these AI tools in your
I
work?
I've tinkered, played around a little bit, but yeah, so far not in a huge way. Yeah, I'm afraid I could have maybe suggested to somebody who is more working with AI a lot to talk today. But I know many who are. Yeah.
It's funny. I spent like several days playing with it for the first time. I don't consider myself a designer or an artist at all, but it was so cool because all of a sudden, yeah, I saw some. Yeah, it's really really interesting. Uh, yeah, I mean, but do you think that like okay, like probably artists who are using heavily using AI and like being famous for that, but like, can you imagine having like an AI like agent, as you said, as a creator? So let's say we have like Elsa, like imaginary Elsa as a creator, and then we just follow Elsa, not like Philip or Rebecca who are using some AI tool as their tools, but rather like having a fully autonomous digital beings being artists.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've already been smaller examples of this, in the sense of people creating Twitter bots, ages ago, a few years back even, that were producing their own content, and bringing up these questions of who's making this, who's writing this. And also, I actually once saw a talk who's from an artist whose name I'm now forgetting, who created a bot that would write out its own poetry using a pen and plotter, and was got set up some scripts for this bot to actually also then email a publishing agent, request to publish their poetry, and got a book published. So I think a lot of artists are thinking about creating machines that create on their own, in their own right, in their own capacity, and really playing with this idea of who is the author, which I think is fascinating. But again, people are still engaging with that as a maker.
One of the notions that I really like, it's like, I remember that like is there like any true author, as in like everything is a remix to an extent, like even the most original author like steals, and the whole notion of like the best artist steal. So it's also interesting to think about it from that perspective as well. You also mentioned immersive media experiences. Like, do you have any interesting projects that you might share? Like, not necessarily yours, but like something that caught your eye.
Recently, or
recently, something that's really cool, so like people can Google
it. Well, okay, so lists of things. I mean, I like the studio Marshmallow Laser Feast. They do some interesting things. For example, they did an immersive remote play where they had actors in motion capture suits acting out Shakespeare's The Tempest, and then people could either join by watching on a screen, or actually there were a few tickets for people actually in headsets. So there are these sorts of things happening. I also have a colleague who is been doing some very interesting work with remote VR, so streaming dance, and her name is Clemence de Beeg. So if you want to Google her, she is also lecturing at Goldsmiths, and I think this sort of thing is quite interesting, thinking about remote performances or plays or theatre within VR, where you're kind of joining these immersive experiences from afar. And then so within my own work, I'm thinking more in the context of installations, so creating work that you experience within a gallery context, and messing around with people's perception within the headset. So that's kind of what I mean when I talk about working within virtual reality.
And what about like full-on metaverse experiences where people can, like, I mean, of course, like, we're far from that given like the tech we have. At least I think so. But so like, will that emerge as like a new form of art, in your opinion, where like you have a mix of gaming that is like 100% virtual reality?
Yes. So, I mean, I'm no expert on the metaverse, and
I think I think that no one is. Like, I don't think that there's even a definition.
And quite a divisive topic in some ways. But I don't know about the metaverse per se. I think that it's these sorts of ideas for content creation, for games, for immersive theatre experiences or films like that. I think that there's a rich future there. But in terms of sort of being in the metaverse to go to work or to go shopping and these sorts of things, I think in my mind still has a quite limited application. Sorry, Mark, talk about it.
He's investing the whole future of the company into that. Like, I don't know, would you have some recommendations for people who might be interested in all of this but like don't have any, like, except of course going to Goldsmith, which is probably like best thing to do?
Yes, come to Goldsmiths if you want to learn how to code or machine learning for artists. Do check us out.
Yeah, are there any like books or like online programs or something like one-on-one level? Something
for for creative coding in general, I mean, there's the most wonderful Dan Schiffman, who, if anyone is interested in creative coding at all, he's kind of a famous educator, really. He has something called the Coding Train, and it's a wonderful, wonderful resource aimed at creatives wanting to code. And yeah, otherwise, I think there's a wealth of different open source tools out there. So we use open frameworks, for example, which is a creative coding tool, and there's a great community online and people who are very responsive to questions on those forums. Yeah, so I think those are great places to start open source creative coding platforms and tools.
Yeah, and like maybe one more speculative and hypothetical question. Like artists in like 50 or 100 years, if you ever like think of it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, do you think that like the need to consume art is eternal, or when we like become more of a machines, let's say, that like the need for art in the current form will diminish?
Well, I think, I mean, this is maybe a biased answer, but in some ways, I feel like the need to create art is eternal. I think that but that's just, I guess I'm speaking from my subjectivity as an artist, like as a creator. But I think that in general, even anyone who makes anything, makes apps, makes games, makes cups, tables, that desire to build something and to put your thoughts out into the world will be around for a very, very long time. And sure, when we're cyborgs, maybe things will be different. Yeah, so
yeah, maybe that's what makes us uniquely human to an extent.
Yeah, I think the need to communicate is kind of at the core, in my opinion. So whether that is making things or going to see things, to see art, you go there for communication. We're very social creatures, and it's how we make sense of the world. We sit around and talk on live streams and try and understand, what we're doing here. So I think that element of what it means to be human will be around for a very, very long time.
Yeah, that's so interesting to think, because like what was also really interesting for me is like people were betting that like AI will be like more present in like more repetitive tasks and stuff, and it seems that like it emerged more significantly in the creative realm. So that was also really AI, no AI. Like,
yes.
AI. I was like, like logistics and some like law clerks and stuff like that, but instead of that, like we have like almost like uh well designers to an extent. But yeah, I mean, it's not art as art, but still like a practical application of art, which is commercial, but we should probably count that as art as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's creativity. I think that thinking about making tools and environments that we engage with every day, and designing spaces for people to use is definitely a creative endeavor. So yes, in that way, they're both involve creative output.
Yeah, I'm looking here at my notes, trying to find something exciting.
I know we've got to fill more time because we don't have Thorsten.
Yeah, and of course we're open to like external questions. So if anyone like has any, it will just pop in. But yeah, I don't know. I was really fascinated with all of this. Really fascinated because I'm working on this like funky project which is related to Mars. Like it's sci-fi-ish, and like I was just like started playing with Dali, and like I could have easily sold the designs and illustrations as as my artwork, but instead I just like used it as a guide for an actual designer to follow. And it's really interesting how actually you really do have problem with fingers. So you have a perfect like digital being, but like it just doesn't have like normal fingers. But yeah, yeah, it's incredible how fast all of this is, and it's probably just like a start. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
I mean, I think that you know, from what I've seen as well, and or even just thinking about my own instincts when working with technology as an artist and working with code and generative systems, you know, creative coding without AI. I think what is actually interesting is sometimes the failings. So, for example, you know, what would it be like to just fill a wall with like strange uh, hands that have been generated by AI,
yeah, that
and
was really cool.
you know, so sort of looking at where it falls apart is often the most fascinating thing for me, at least, to kind of see the holes in the system, and when it makes something really odd that a human would never make, that is interesting. That is when you really start to feel like, wow, you know, this is an AI creature that has its own voice. As coming back to this question of, you know, can AI be an artist in its own right? Um, Seeing, yeah, those little strange, odd moments where you're like, wow, this thing is speaking to me out of who knows what, and that's when you
Yes,
start to get a bit frightened.
yeah, exactly, because then it becomes like truly alien. So we're kind of expecting aliens to come from space, but we can actually create them. It's a very interesting perspective. Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
and
I yeah. Sorry, and I don't know if you're familiar with like any cool projects that are AI generated sounds and music. Because I was trying to listen to some things that I could find online, but like that wasn't that good as like the whole visual uh,
mm,
thing.
yeah, I'm not so as much aware about sound art, unfortunately. So there's nothing that comes to mind immediately. Um, but now this is some inspiration to go do some further research and ask around. So thank you. But apologies for everyone here listening in. I have no words of wisdom. Yeah. If anyone else has ideas, maybe they would like to share.
Yeah, maybe they can get like yeah, maybe they can get a scholarship and go study at Goldsmith. That would be cool. I mean, a lot of people from Serbia went to Goldsmiths, so that's that's really cool. Uh,
Within the computing or in fine art or just in general?
in general, all over the place. Yeah, so that's that's cool. Yeah, even some communication people, art people, tech people, like literally all over the. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to ask. So, yeah, maybe if you have like an interesting story to share or like some project of yours to promote, something that you're proud of or like think can actually be inspirational for our listeners, maybe we can end up
Mm,
with that.
yeah, I mean, so I suppose the main thing that I like to promote is yeah, the creating with code and with technology in general, and I suppose like really saying again that, you know, Goldsmith is a wonderful place. Do email me if you're get in contact with the MA MFA Computational Arts. if you are interested in studying any of these things, or sort of coming to learn more about these things. And we're very open to makers of all sorts, and very much like to ground new technology in older ways of making. So we have people coming who are musicians or painters or dancers or choreographers, to learn how to code and to learn to pick up these new technologies and work with machine learning. And then we also have people coming who've been coding for years, who are engineers, who are coming to learn how to be creative. So what I really love about that community that has sort of emerged is that it's very interdisciplinary, and these questions about, is this actually art or is that not art, is kind of out the window, because it's such an expanded definition of what art is, and we have people making such amazing and weird things, and you really learn so much from all of these different practitioners. And so that's one of the main things that I get excited about and like to promote, is teaching and being involved in these communities. And then otherwise, I suppose I'm part of an arts collective called Ingrid, and we do like really odd things together, like creating works that are sort of live performance art. So some of our members are musicians or create algorithmic music, while others would consider themselves sculptors more, so working with physical computing and creating strange LED sculptures that respond to sound or words that people are saying into a microphone, and very mixed media in this way. So that's the thing that I'm sort of working on at the moment, is an event that we're doing this week.
Oh, that's
so
cool. Yeah. And I was like, maybe just one more question. I mean, you spent some time like reflecting on colonialism and post-colonialism, and maybe like an interesting perspective there might be like, is this whole AI, can we understand this whole AI thing as a way to colonize, as in like I don't know if I can explain the dynamic that I'm thinking of, like but can AI be understood as something where like a certain culture, say, or whatever, like technology, progressive culture, are just like eating all of the world to an extent?
so the AI might be the new colonizer of the distant
in
future.
terms, in terms of like style and culture.
You mean sort of like having a dominant, like in the way that maybe like the West has sort of had a dominant moment in history? That is a very speculative big question there. I don't even think I can answer that. It's a good one to think about. Who knows? Maybe. I feel like this we're starting to get into the realm of speculative fiction and sci-fi writers. Should I ask somebody to write a book on these things? Perhaps. I think with all these sorts of things, thinking about, for example, neocolonialism or digital colonialism, like these are big topics as well. If we want to talk about, for example, Google or Apple, the farming of labor to third world countries, where you have this invisible digital labor, where people, might be responsible for scanning millions of book pages, or being the ones who are filtering through social media content to moderate things, to remove things, content that might be triggering to certain people. That is not good. These are forms of exploitation, and I think that is sort of often the underbelly of technology. There's a lot of big words about new, solve all your problems, techno solutionism in this way, but the reality is that often these systems don't work in entirely automated ways, and there are still people in the system that are responsible for doing a lot of the dirty work. and for checking when all the algorithms fail, like looking through, mounds and mounds of data. And so in this way, I really do think that we always have to guard against new forms of exploitation. And my thought is that probably it will still be humans exploiting humans. Forget about the AI. And yeah, it's something that's very vital to be aware of, and yeah, to not get too sold on the dream and the glossy words that get put out. That's my feeling.
Yeah,
the big hard truth at the end.
yeah. It's a good message for the end. Yeah, thank you, Rebecca, so much for being with us. I hope that I had questions that were not too speculative. But,
no, it's good. And I think we did a good job filling the space that was meant to be filled by 3. So we tried. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, have a nice evening.